Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this workshop, Financing Deep Retrofit of Social Housing with a Holistic Neighborhood Approach. My name is Oliver Rapf. I'm the Executive Director of BPIE, and I will be moderating the workshop this morning. And I'm very happy that we have a number of excellent speakers who I will introduce in a moment. Now, this is the fourth workshop of a series within the Open Lab project. And we have been asking experts from the financial sector to give us their feedback, to give us their advice, to give us their opinion about how we can ensure that the financing conditions for positive energy neighborhoods are improving over time. During this workshop, we want to make sure that we have an interaction with you in the audience. So we will give you the opportunity to provide any questions you have through the chat function. We will collect them and address them at the end of the meeting, so after the presentation. That means we're not going to take questions right after the presentation, each presentation, but at the very end. And we will certainly give you an opportunity to participate in the panel discussion through these questions. So what actually is the Open Lab project? Well, Open Lab is an EU-funded project which is testing and demonstrating the concept of positive energy neighborhoods. We call them PENs as an abbreviation. And these tests are happening in 3 living labs in the city of Tartu in Estonia, in the city of Pamplona in Spain, and in the city of Genk in Belgium. And that means that this project is really collecting experiences on the ground. It's not a theoretical project. These activities are happening already or will happen in the near future. And the very special thing about Open Lab is that it actually ensures that the citizens, the people who live in the neighborhoods, who live in these buildings, are really consulted, that they're really playing a very active role in the agreement of the renovations which are happening, in the design of the renovations, so that they have a say in their own future, because obviously they live in these buildings which are going to be renovated or which are currently being renovated. So we will see 3 very different examples because they cover different climatic regions. They cover different building types within the residential building type sector. And of course, we also have cultural differences. We're looking at Estonia, we're looking at Belgium, and we're looking at Spain. So this workshop is based on the fact that social housing makes up about 8% of the total building stock in the EU. But in some countries, this figure can actually go up to 20%. And that means that if we really want to achieve our climate goals, we have to renovate all these buildings in a deep way, making sure they become very, very energy efficient and that they integrate renewable heating and cooling and renewable electricity, of course. We also know that these deep renovations offer multiple benefits for the communities and the societies and the people who live in these buildings. For example, improved comfort, but also improved health conditions. The projects which we are going to look at really make sure that there is social inclusion, that citizens are involved in them. And we also want to make sure that these deep renovations really increase the climate resilience of buildings. And all this aligns actually very well with the idea of positive energy neighborhoods, because the idea of positive energy neighborhoods also wants to make sure that we alleviate energy poverty and contribute to energy security and have that strong focus on local engagement and co-creation, as I already mentioned. So we will dive quite deeply into the 3 examples we have. And we also have a speaker who is representing the overall interest of the social housing community in Europe. But first of all, I would like to start with our first example, which comes from Belgium, and which will be presented by William Nelissen, who's from Wonen in Limburg, who is involved in this project. The project is happening in Genk, which is part, which is which is located in the Belgian province of Flanders. And William, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I will hand over the virtual microphone to you, and I look very much forward to your presentation in the next round about 12 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I'm William Nielsen from Wonen in Limburg. We are a new, can I take the control of the presentation? Is that possible?
I don't think if that's possible that you take control. If you simply say next slide, we will move on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe we take the next slide. Yeah, Wonen in Limburg, we are a new social housing company. We are a merging company of 19 other little companies in the province of Limburg in Belgium. We are the largest social housing company in Belgium. So we have a responsibility to look for some answers in what we are doing and what will be the future. Yeah, next. We have a renovation strategy into 2050 with about 2 billion euros that we need for all of those renovations. And for the new building stocks, yes, next. We have about 500,000 into 2030 we need, but we have to double that up. So we have to do it first time right. Yeah, thank you. A little insight in the boundaries of the Belgian social housing regulation. We have an intensification part into 2050 was stricter than for the private home. So we have a lot of work to do. But we have also a government that decides what rules we have to follow. So they know if they say how to build, how to renovate, who we should rent to. There's a waiting list from about 8 to 12 years in Flanders. They decide how high the rent is. It's for Limburg, for our province, it's about 330 euros a month. And there's a strictly financing system, what's called FS3. That means that we have to renovate, to build with a loan of -1% over 33 years. That's only provided by the Flemish government. We can't get any loans on the private market. And now there's another rule that new investments are not possible in the first 15 years after we got a loan for some buildings. So we have to do it in first time right. Yeah. Open Lab, it's an innovative project in Genk. Like Oliver told, it's a neighborhood built in the early 70s. And there we are going to do a deep renovation within the neighborhood with a lot of technology, a lot of storage, but also a large social impact, because all those tenants, they stay in their homes while we are renovating those dwellings. Now, it's not the most easy part, because we choose for the 27 houses we are renovating in this project for several technologies who are aligned to each other, but we have to learn a lot. Yeah, next one. What we are doing in those neighborhoods is that we are building, renovating those dwellings, but at the same time we are doing a digital twin approach. Yeah, can I have the next slide? Yeah, so we are doing a digital twin, and that digital twin has to be exact. That means that what we are learning in the digital twin, we have to prove it in real life. but it is foreseen that we have to get a good working digital twin, because we can use it for the technical side, but also for the financial side of those deep neighborhood renovations. We have also the challenge of the changing energy landscape in Flanders, but I think it's opportune for all of Europe. There's an energy shift in Belgium. The gas price is too low when we are looking to the electricity price. So the new government will work on that side. We don't know what it will be next year. ETS2 means from 2027 about an extra costs for those families from 125 euros a month. There's strict legislation, but for the Open Lab project, we are working about all those numbers. We don't have a lot of results at this moment, but we are using a lot of results we have from other pilot projects we are using in Open Lab to get Open Lab a more convenient project. Yeah, can I have the next slide, please? One of the projects we are using for our data set is Social Energy Sprong 1.0 in Flanders. There we see that we have been calculating in advance that the tenants, they would gain about 2,000 euros a month. For the year 2022, we saw that the advance for the renter is about 4,000 euros. It was a very strange year with a lot of difficult price settings from energies, but you feel that, yeah, when a tenant has this advantage, we have to look what that means for our financial system or loans. Yeah, next one, please. What we learned, we are talking about Social Energy Sprong as a positive energy building. We need a lot of positive energy buildings to make a positive energy neighborhood, because it can compensate also some other buildings or houses who are difficult to get it to an energy positive status. In the neighborhood of Open Lab, we also have some heritage buildings, and yeah, when you have a positive energy neighborhood, yeah, you have to count that in place. What we learned for Social Energy Sprong is that the investment, we have to do it in first time right. The tenant stays in their homes. That means that, yeah, it will cost a little more, I would say, but the discounted payback period was about 40 years. That's a long time, but the other possibilities we had some results out of other projects. When you go to an E50 level, it will be about 30 years. And when we go in 2 steps, we do now a minor investment, and afterwards we do a total retrofit option. Yeah, it would be too expensive, and we have to change or to demolish those houses there to rebuild them. So we decided that when the tenants have to stay in their homes, we have to put a team on it to do it first time right in 1 step. So we used the investment numbers of those projects to learn from for the Open Lab project. Next one, please. The cash flow model we used was also incorporated in an OEPC contracting opportunity. with a bonus-malus system. That means that when the OEPC contracting is helping us, or is doing better than foreseen, they get a bonus. When it's worse, or they have to pay us a certain euros. This cash flow model was, for us, was a step forward, but the Flemish government, they told us that they don't believe in it because of the loan. We have to loan from the government, and that's a big issue in Flanders. But we maintain the cash flow model like this. And we are studying a lot more on it to hopefully convince the government to follow us in this one. Next one, please. Other project we learned a lot from the last years and months is social holistic retrofit. It's a retrofit of a full neighborhood, where we are going to also have a positive energy neighborhood, but with three insights. That means we are looking at those renovate strategy from the tenants, what's important for the tenants, what's important for the environment, and what's important for one in Limburg. And that learned a lot about how we have to look at a neighborhood in total. And what we learned here from this one is that, may I have the next slide? Is that when we are looking to a renovation of a neighborhood to get it energy positive, it's very difficult to get it financially in a close budget. Because when we are looking to this sites or this sort of renovations, it costs a lot of money, and it won't be paid back in 33 years. What is the time of the loan? But therefore, we use some other insights. Next slide, please. And there we are looking at the energy flows, the energy financial flows on this kind of neighborhood. When we are looking at solar panels, we are looking at the Aster project in Flanders, where an external company, Aster, who's owned by several social housing companies, is putting those PV panels on the roofs. We don't have to invest that money for the PV panels. And we are looking to provide some deliverance of energy, heat nets, other things like that. And we see when we are looking like a social energy social housing company to energy flows, and we can use them to get a neighborhood balanced. There's also a financial support that can help us to renovate it to a positive neighborhood. In Open Lab, we are looking also at other things like the balancing of the electricity net, of storage on a neighborhood, like batteries on a neighborhood scale, and all that sort of technologies to help us to get our financial system in balance. What we are seeing also is that the new technologies who are coming in the next years, we have to look at them also to get us more future-proof, and maybe they can save us some money if we are providing now houses with systems who can be changed in the next 10 to 15 years. I can have the next slide. So I have some conclusions that we take from the from Open Lab project. For us, it's a complex project. I told we have a lot of technologies around a neighborhood. Every house has another configuration. We have to learn a lot of, but we think that if we get those digital twin model on track, that will learn us a lot of how we have to do it in the next years. And it can get us a decision model that's what's very important. Also technically, but also financially. Well, investments do we have to do in a neighborhood to get it right and payable. That's important for us as a housing company, because we don't have a lot of money. We have to do it first time right, but also for the investors. In Flanders, it's the government, but in the rest of Europe, there are also private investors who will be looking at social housing neighborhoods. So we have also to look at to determine the value of deploying PEDs of neighborhoods in the energy grid, in other energy flows. How can we use a positive energy neighborhood to help us with that question? But yeah, investing in whatever we are doing in social housing, it is all about risks. And therefore, I want to share a last slide from my part, which will learn us a lot when we are investing, when we are giving money to renovate some neighborhoods, some houses. Yeah, we see in a lot of pilot projects that we are looking at the EPC label of a house to get the strategy of renovation on track. But when we are looking at a real EID, and EID stands for Energy Demand Index, that means that we are measuring the energy demand of the house without the impact of the tenants living in those houses. We are seeing a lot of strange things. House 1, it has an E label of 687. That's a lot of energy demand for those houses. There's a house that is heated by an electrical heating system. But in real measurements, it's only 143 kilowatts an hour a year. What means that the strategy we are doing for the first house, or for the fictive EPC, yeah, it's not a good one. At the other side, we renovated some houses to an E level of 20. And when we are measuring them, we see that one of those houses has an energy demand of 220. That means that we put about, let's say, 100,000 euros in renovation of an house and dwelling, and we get a result of 220 because it was not well executed. We searched what was going wrong, and so when we are looking at renovations, at taking risks, financial risks, yeah, from 2027, Europe gives us the opportunity to get those strategies like EID, to use them. And we think that, yeah, we are looking, as one in Limburg, we are looking at those technologies to measure them, to be sure that every euro we are investigating in those renovations, it's well spent. So for the financial market, I think it's very important to look also at those certainties. Thank you, Oliver.
William, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation, and pointing out that it can actually be really beneficial to renovate a whole neighborhood to a positive energy level rather than only an individual building, because you mentioned the balancing opportunities you have. And also for pointing out in your last slide how important it is that renovations are properly implemented and probably that the user who is living in the building, the tenant, then also behaves and manages the building effectively. I just have one very quick technical question for you. It came up in the chat. Someone was asking what kind of discount rates were you applying in your calculations?
Can you repeat that question, please?
Yes, the question was, which
Yeah.
came in from the chat, what discount rates did you apply in your analysis? If you don't have the answer straight away, and if you need to look it up, we can cover it later. But if
I will
you
look it up. I
okay,
will
good. Good.
open my my tools for that.
Okay, wonderful. Then we will cover
Yeah.
that later in the Q&A and in the discussion. So thank you very much again, William, for this excellent presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll then move to the next speaker, who is Julien Dijol. He's a policy coordinator at Housing Europe, and Housing Europe is a Brussels-based association which is representing the interests of social housing companies and associations. Julien, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And we will be controlling the presentation, so all you need to say is next slide. And the next round about 12 minutes are your 12 minutes. So I'll hand over the virtual microphone to you and please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Oliver, and thank you to BPIE and Open Lab for the invitation and the organization of the meeting. And I think it's a good transition indeed. We heard about a local housing company, and we heard from William the complexity also of investing in deep retrofitting. And what I will try to do is to have a slightly bigger picture about different aspects that will explain why it is indeed complex and why the renovation wave is not going as quickly as we wished. It's also important to look at those different aspects, and hopefully at the end of the workshop, we will have a clearer view about what needs to be done in the future. So yeah, the conundrum. Conundrum is indeed a word which to say that it's a challenge. It's intricate. And I think William explained quite well that when you work in the social housing sector, you have plenty of components to look at, plenty of dimensions from not only from the financing aspect but also regulatory, as he also explained. So the next slide. We'll tell you a bit about the current context. And indeed, I mentioned the renovation wave. And I mean, at the moment, the challenge is really to maintain the pace, the rhythm, I mean, the speed of the renovation wave. And I took two examples, one from France on the left side, the other one from Austria on the right side of the graph. From the French perspective, the point is to basically this graph in French, and sorry, which explain the number of units, social housing units that have benefit from any kind of renovation in the period between 2013 and 2023. So in the last 10 years. This is the red bar. In the green, dark green, you look at the number of dwellings that has had an increase of EPC level, so a change in the EPC level. And the light green is the number of dwellings that benefited from going from basically the worst performing to the best performing, which is basically a kind of definition of deep renovation, if we wanted to simplify a bit. And so what you see is that actually in the point about the challenge at the moment is that since 2021, we see in France a relatively decrease of the number of dwellings that is being refurbished, number of dwellings that change APC level, and also the number of dwellings that has this deep renovation approach. And of course, there are many reasons for that, but mainly it's about the lack of funding, the lack of public funding. And indeed, it's a bit the main message of my presentation will be about the importance of having the public support in one way or another. In the case of France, there are many different subsidies, but one big point was that the French government decided to increase what kind of tax. It's basically the fact that they were obliged to reduce also their rental income, and the fact that you have a lower rental incomes means that you have lower cash flows and own capital and own funds to do the renovation. And at some point, as a social housing organization, you have to make some choices. And as I think William explained also the fact that with the limited amount of money, you have to make the right choice. And so this is the overall situation in France at the moment. And if you look at Austria on the right side, you will see a relatively stable situation. So we are not in the situation of declining the number of units refurbished per year, but we are not seeing an increase neither. We are seeing a relatively stable situation. And we will see that those two countries have different financing model for social housing, and yet we are in a situation where there's a let's say kind of struggle at the moment that we need to indeed overcome if we want to meet our collective targets. So the next slide is also looking at another aspect, but I will go quite quickly, is the fact that as a social housing organization at the local level, they have to meet plenty of challenges, including, of course, the decarbonization, but not only. And this is a graph coming from Denmark, which basically see the number of households and homes that will need to be adapted to the aging of the population. And our Danish member and the Danish Social Housing Federation, they have made this calculation to look at what is the expected growth in terms of number of accessible homes per year. And this is also something that social housing organizations have to look at. So not only the renovation, but as part of the renovation, also looking at this question of accessibility, which of course increased the cost of renovation. The next slide is also to look at another kind of challenge, also coming from Denmark, is this question, the question of new construction. As you may imagine, as a social housing organization, you have to choose sometimes between new build and renovation, although the funding stream are not exactly the same, but in terms of cash flow and own capital, which I mentioned earlier for France, both objectives or activities will consume your cash flows. So they have this decision to take, and I wanted to show here also coming from BL, our Danish Social Housing Federation, a graph looking at the share of non-for-profit so social housing in a new construction in Copenhagen, and you see in 2023 0. So it means that in 2023 there was no social housing units built in Copenhagen, and yet there is a need for that. And so you see the kind of challenge that social housing organizations are facing as well. So the next slide is looking at, let's say, the solutions, because indeed I was talking about the challenge at the moment and the fact that the renovation wave is not going as quickly as possible. And we need solutions, and solutions are there. It's not always easy, not always replicable everywhere, but there are some things that to look at. And one of them is to look at, I think basically what William mentioned before is on the fair energy transition part is looking at the different techniques and solutions that are put in place. Some of them are known, you know them. Energiesprong is basically was the front runner, and as part of let's say the continuation of Energiesprong, Housing Europe is involved in European project. Two of them are mentioned here, whose objective is to scale up the Energiesprong aspect, and to do that you need to indeed work on how to create a demand, sustainable pipeline for projects, and on the other hand, making sure that the renovation sector, the construction sector, is able to provide the supply. So basically to provide for affordable solution. This is an example coming here, the picture from France. So a real example of renovation in social housing sector in France using prefabricated panels. And so things are going up. Things are in the process, but of course we need to do more. The second type of solutions, if your second slide, the next slide, please, is to look at other aspects of the overall challenge of the climate change. I will go very quickly because, okay, we don't want to focus on this too much here, but just for you to know that, of course, in the social housing sector, there are plenty of also project and solutions to be looked at for the adaptation to the climate change. And this will grow and grow as a one important activity in the future. The next slide, please. The next slide is particularly relevant, I think, for the discussion today, because it's about the financial risks that I think has been mentioned by William. How do you do when actually your own capital, your own funds are constrained, or when your basically main funder, I mean the public sector, is not able to provide for enough support? Well, one aspect that I think is going up as a solution or coming back to on the discussion is the energy performance contracts. I mean, if you remember 10 years ago, there was a big push, at least in the conversation in Brussels about EPC, and somehow it disappeared from the radar, at least in the socializing sector. But now that local authority have to and public authority have to choose between different areas to invest in, this question of EPC as an energy performance contract is coming back again. There are plenty of advantages and positive aspects when using EPC, in particular, of course, the fact that someone else will pay from the investment front upfront, and this is of course very relevant in the current context. The other good point with EPC is the idea that you can negotiate a guarantee of end result, and this is something that is particularly important today. But for this, you need, and I think that was mentioned by William at the end in his last slide, you need a very strong reliability of the data. And you need absolutely no contradiction or discrepancy between different type of measurement. So that's why it was so far not very much used in the social housing sector in Europe, but we hope that will be more and more used thanks to also reliable data on this. The last aspect is also for you to bear in mind, although not strictly speaking related to today's discussion, is the fact that social inclusion remain one of the biggest mission for a social housing provider. And this also requires funding, and this requires also a lot of upskilling. So upskilling in-house or working together in partnership with other organizations will also be high on the agenda of the social housing sector in the future. So the next slide, it's basically something that I wanted to mention. It relates to one other project we are involved in, and actually BPIE is also involved in. It's Sinikea. It's also about promoting a positive energy district. And one of the examples there from Austria, because I mentioned Austria, was a neighborhood that has been refurbished, partly refurbished. Other new buildings have been built as well. But those buildings are fantastic. I mean, they basically tick all boxes in terms of decarbonization of heat, in terms of energy efficiency, and a lot of other things, like you put on a slide, shared mobility, and many things. But this has a price. This has a cost, and the cost has to be paid by someone, ideally by a mix of people, but also including the tenants. And in the case of Wierenhauser in Salzburg, but it is also the case in many projects, you need to increase the rent. You need to increase the rent, knowing that on the other side, the energy bill will decrease. So the overall cost of living should remain the same for the people, but for an increased comfort, both in the summer and in the winter. So this kind of project are, as I said, really brilliant in terms of technology and so on. But we are also to be aware that to replicate that, you need indeed funding support at the right level. The next slide. So I think my time is almost up, so I will really briefly going through that. I think fundamentally the main message when you look at finance is to understand that you cannot, I mean, you have to look at the financing of socializing in general. It's impossible to simply look at financing decarbonization and not related it to the overall financing model of social housing. And I took two examples of great model of social housing: Austria on the right, on the left side, and Denmark on the right side. Without going into the detail, I mean, those two models, they are really sustainable because they rely on a mix of different sources of funding, including the tenants, in the form of a fee, which is actually a part of your rent, which is every month put into a fund. Those funds will basically be used to do the necessary maintenance, but also the renovation when needed. And this has allowed, in a way, or benefited Austria and Denmark, which are actually, as mentioned also in some of the graph before, were actually quite good in terms of number of renovation every year. But this is because they have a really stable model of financing. So you need that in order to get to the right level for the renovation wave. And I think the last two slides, now I want to mention, or when you do the last one, very briefly, is about, but I think one of the speakers later will do that. So just to say that the EU has a role to play in the current context. We need funding, and the EU can provide part of it, not all of it. I mean, member states will remain the primary funder and organizer of the social housing sector, but the EU can provide some funding from the cohesion policy onto the Invest EU and the recovery plan. So I think I'm going to stop here, and just to, for you to understand that this complexity we mentioned at the beginning is very related to the sector itself, but we have solutions, and we hope that there will be the right framework to replicate that. So thank you very much.
Julia, thank you very much for your presentation, and in particular underlining the fact that there are solutions. They may not always be easy, but we know that they do exist. You mentioned the role of the EU, and we now come to a European organization, the European Investment Bank. And I'm very happy to welcome Paola Mendes, who's working as a sector engineer at the EIB. Welcome, Paola. We will talk about financing deep retrofit of social housing, and in particular what the EIB, as the European bank, is doing on this aspect. Paola, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me well.
Very well, yes.
Thanks. So yes, my name is Paola Mendes. I work in the Energy Efficiency and Energy Advisory Division here at the European Investment Bank. Thanks for having me, and I hope this will complement a little bit what has been said so far. So next slide, please. So just one short introduction about the EIB. You probably all know the institution, but just in case, so this is the Bank of the European Union. We are headquartered here in Luxembourg, and since 1958, the bank has invested over 1.5 trillion in projects in the EU. So next slide. So we have here at the bank several type of instruments in order to support different type of projects. So I'm not going to enter into this. It was just to give you an overview on the different instruments we have and the different instruments we work with. Next slide, please. And we also have different policies and priorities. So among these priorities, of course, there is climate action and housing. Please, next slide. And so within the housing sector, the EIB works also with different instruments in different segments, going from the emergency housing to the market housing. In the last 4 years, In the last 4 years, the bank has invested 2 to 3 billion in energy efficiency sector, and between 1 and 1.5 billion per year in the affordable housing. So one example, and this is the next slide. So one example on new construction with energy efficiency, with high energy efficiency parameters. This is example of Navarra, Nasuvinsa. This is a project where the bank lent approximately 40 million euros in order to construct 500 new homes for rent with passive house. With passive house, it means that the energy demand of these houses is a maximum of 15 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. So it's highly efficient. And as you see in the slide, this meant a reduction of over 75% of the energy demands in comparison to the legal requirements in the country. So this, in turn, creates a positive circle, because it means basically that energy bills for the tenants are highly reduced and the comfort is highly increased. So this is just to give you an example on where the bank is investing on the other sides of on the other segment. So this is new construction. In the next slide, I'll start discussing a little bit more about renovation and energy efficiency. So the picture that you see here is a real picture of a project that is currently undergoing for the renovation. And maybe just I'll start by saying that I think it's, for at least from our perspective, because I'm from the energy efficiency team, it's very important to distinguish between renovation and energy efficiency. Not every renovation, of course, includes energy efficiency, and therefore for us it's very important to always include the word energy efficiency when we are talking about renovation, to make it clear, the extent of this renovation, because when we are dealing with the renovation, of course, the energy efficiency part is very important and needs to be taken into account from the very beginning, right? So why do we need to do this? It's because we have a huge stock, that is very old. It needs to be renovated in general, in meanings not only on the energy efficiency side, but also on other aspects. And they were mentioning here about accessibility and modernization, basically to new standards that are applied now than in comparison to the standards that we had 30 years ago. So we have a huge stock of housing units that are old and needs to be renovated, that have very high levels of heating consumptions, and therefore there is a big issue, a big concern on energy poverty, which means that users cannot afford to either warm their units or cool them in summer, depending on the weather they are living in. So energy efficiency can, on one hand, help to reduce the energy poverty, reduce the energy bills of the tenants, help us also to, it is key actually to achieve the climate targets that we have. But it's key also for the owners of the building, because it helps them to extend the economic life of their assets. So the longer the assets, the longer the lifespan of the assets, the better for the owners and the users, because they don't need to search for new solutions in terms of housing, right? Next slide, please. So as I was saying at the beginning, the bank supports energy efficiency with different instruments, whether it's direct lending, indirect lending, but we also have some technical assistance I will be, presenting you, and maybe you are aware, but if not, maybe this is also an opportunity. And the next slide. So this is one example of an energy efficiency project where we have comprehensive renovation of an existing social and affordable housing. This is in Germany. The investment was 70 million euros. So this is the investment loan that was given to this promoter, not necessarily the full cost of the renovation, just to keep that in mind. So this included the renovation of almost 500 units. Savings were way over 40%. I think it was more in this 50-60% of the savings. And it was discussed as well, but we do require verification when we are doing energy efficiency projects. For the bank, this is a must, in the sense that we really need, when we approach a project, then we look at the project, but we also see at the indicators it has and how these indicators can be verified. So in this particular case, as I was saying, the energy savings were huge. There were some challenges. I will be discussing maybe later a little bit some of the challenges we see when we are financing this type of project. But this is the kind of example where the bank is providing financing for the renovation, and not only, it can be combined with also the construction of new units. Next slide, please. This is another example of a renovation, also a major renovation. This is in Spain, and this is a little bit different setup, because in this case, the promoter, so the loan goes to the promoter. Once again, this is a loan of around 50 million euros. And the objective is the comprehensive renovation of this type of housing. So in this case, this is private owned unit. So this is not social housing, but I mean, it also highlights a little bit of the challenges we see when we're dealing with the renovation of housing. As was mentioned before, there is 8% of the total stock that is linked to social housing, but there is also another stock, very important as well, that needs to be renovated, and that has additional challenges because there we have, individual owners that at some point in time needs to get together, make a decision, and come with a project forward. So this kind of projects can also be supported by the bank under a different scheme, right? Because this is the scheme here in this case is that there is a promoter in between. In this case, is the local authority, right? And they basically have put together this project in order to renovate the whole building at once, in meaning putting everyone in agreement in order to move forward with this renovation, and putting the emphasis also on energy efficiency, because one of the issues when we are dealing with energy efficiency is sometimes invisible. It's much easier, and I think the promoters that are listening today, and especially William, that was speaking at the first part of the conference of the webinar, knows it very well. It's easier to speak about maybe accessibility, or how the facade looks like, or other attributes of the houses, and sometimes energy efficiency is pretty invisible. So there has to be a way to get the information to the user, whether it's from a low social housing or not, get to the user and show them the benefits of having an energy efficiency retrofitting, plus additional concerns that the owners may have. I think this also kind of is a link to the initial word saying, how do we involve the users of the houses in renovation plans? And I think there has to be a mix there, where we see that projects that have an energy efficiency component may have also additional components that are also important attributes for the users. And then you can have, a more, how can I say, holistic plan that maybe, fits better the needs of the user at the end of the day. So in this particular case, so the savings that we are expecting in this project are very important, between 30, but more, tend to be more important in the sense of 50-60%, and this is for vulnerable families only. So next slide. So I forgot to mention that this project, and the one in Spain, has been supported by the ELENA facility, and this is now where I'm going to present a little bit about how the bank also assists promoters from the technical perspective. So these two examples that I gave you were about financing directly to promoters, whether they need to build new houses, whether they need to renovate them. But then there is also this additional tool that is a joint initiative between the European Investment Bank and the European Commission under InvestEU. And this particular facility, the ELENA facility, helps promoter to put together this needs for renovation, in the sense that well define what is needed to be done in order to get to the investments. So the step before investing, of course, there is a moment of analysis, which level of energy efficiency can we achieve, what kind of measures can we really put in place, how do we talk to the user, to the tenants, do we need mediation services there, do we need to do a survey, so there are several steps before getting into the decision on whether it's going to be, I don't know, 20 millimeters insulation or 50. And so for this let's say, so for this assessment, there is this facility that already has provided, several, almost 300 millions of EU support, mobilizing almost 10 billion of investment. So the ELENA facility, and next slide, please, focus on providing basically technical assistance to different type of projects. And among this project is the renovation of buildings. We also have transport in it, but mainly I think the portfolio now is very concentrated on the renovation of existing buildings, including the introduction of renewable energies into this. So there are some general rules in order to apply, because this is an unrolling facility. So any promoter could apply at any point in time within the EU. But there are some important conditions. First of all, we are looking at the project that we have an impact at least between, around 30 million euros invested in the next 3 years. So ELENA is there to support the program for a limited period of time of 3 years. And in these 3 years, this renovation needs to happen, right? The ELENA would cover up to 90% of the eligible costs. So basically, technical assistance, whether you need an engineer to do the calculations for the renovation, whether you need some support on the mediation side, whether you need some support for the procurement. There was EPC we're mentioning also this morning. So this is also what ELENA could support to. Providing some support in order to put together the EPC that are not easy and indeed require to have some data, which is usually one of the issues that also were mentioned. We don't have data from previous buildings, but usually you renovate the building, then you put the right meters, the right system in order to follow up monitoring this consumption. But it's usually we don't have this before, so this is of course an issue when you want to put this kind of contract together. So the other condition of ELENA is that, as I said, the investment needs to be done in this period. So there is a condition there, because you need to achieve a leverage of at least 10 when we are dealing with residential buildings. And if you're not able to demonstrate this materialized investment, what we call in our language, then it could be that you need to, the promoter will need to repay some part of the ELENA grant provided. So as I said, 3 to 4 years implementation, 4 years in the case of transport, but 3 years in the case of buildings. It's a short period. It's a challenging one, and this is why projects need to come to us with a certain level of maturity in order for us to move it forward in the process. But it's a good tool that we have used, and in the next slide, I'm going to give you one example. Well, this is just the main results of ELENA, but let me go to the next one directly, because I think I already mentioned that. So this is the example of the previous project. So as I mentioned, let me put the pieces together. I mentioned about this investment loan, this loan that was given to this promoter in order to complement the renovation. And on this slide, I have what ELENA has provided. So this technical assistance grant that I was mentioning. And in this particular case, it has been extremely useful, because you need to go to the users with a technical definition of what can be done, the investment that this will imply, the amount that will be need to pay back, right? And also in this case, accessibility was also included, because it was a big important. I think one of the lessons learned from COVID in this project was that people need to modify a little bit where they are living, and renovation again is about energy efficiency, but it can also and should also maybe include other topics. And I think I'm running out of time, but I don't know if I have another slide. Maybe very quick. I'll try to go very quick on this. I think there are some challenges and opportunity. One of the main challenges is, of course, the asymmetry of information. The one investment is not the one using the building. I think we have also seen several issues regarding the timing of the implementation. So when do we go into a full renovation, and how in some cases you have other non-energy efficiency issues. So we have seen projects where costs go very high because of asbestos, because of accessibility, because mediation, etc., etc. So once again, energy efficiency is one of the issues, but the project itself may come with another completely different issues that need to be solved at that point in time. So you cannot leave, for instance, the issue of asbestos for a second round. It needs to be tackled at the same moment you are tackling energy efficiency issues. And maybe let me go to the last one. So just to say that, from our perspective, energy efficiency is about renovation. It's about challenges because every house is different, every project is different, but it's also about improving quality of life, improving comfort, improving health, and improving resilience. And I think maybe this, I'm going to be left it a little bit open, because the issue of how do we renovate, with the idea of, future readiness, I think is still under discussion. I think how do we adapt, to new temperatures, and how do we take those new temperatures profile into account when you're dealing with energy efficiency renovation? I think it's a point that is open, and it's a point that is challenging. We have focused a lot on heating requirements so far in many of the countries, but I think there is clearly a challenge about heat waves and how do the buildings behave under those difficult conditions. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paola, also for mentioning these very important aspects of getting adaptation investments right. And maybe we have some time in the discussion and in the Q&A session to dive more deeply into that topic. I just wanted to remind everyone in the audience, there are actually two functions on this webinar platform. You have a chat box and you have a Q&A box to send in your questions. We're monitoring both, so don't worry whether you put it in one or the other. Just use them and we will collect your questions and insert them later into the panel discussion. And I also want to mention that, but you will have seen that already, that we are recording this webinar because we want to make it available later on our website and the project's website. So we will make sure that we disseminate all the excellent presentations in the video format to everyone who wants to see them. And so I would like now to welcome our final speaker for this morning, Paola Cerilli. Paola Cerilli is a scientific coordinator at the University of York for the Supershine project. I love that acronym, Supershine. It speaks for itself. And so I'm very much looking forward to hear from you about the challenges and the requirements to access private financing for neighborhood renovations. Paola, thank you very much for joining us this morning. The floor is yours.
Thank you for inviting me. Good morning, everyone. Actually, I'm going to talk today about two projects, both SuperEye and Supershine, because they are connected to each other. So SuperEye is funded by Horizon 2020. Supershine is funded by Horizon Europe and UKRI Research and Innovation Fund. And Supershine is part of the new European Bauhaus initiative as well. I'm going to put the link for our websites in the chat. Is there. In fact, the website is in common between the two projects, because Supershine is focused on lighthouse districts, mainly social housing based, focused, and SuperEye instead is focused only on single buildings. Basically, Supershine is the evolution of SuperEye, so that's why I'm talking about both. And what we are doing as part of these two projects, we are working together with social housing associations who are our partners, and we are putting together a one-stop shop, particularly for Supershine, where we provide the technical, social, environmental, and financial support in order to carry out this energy efficiency refurbishment for social housing and also affordable housing. Also, we work with local SMEs, particularly when thinking about how to implement this refurbishment, trying to also boost the local economy. And because of that, we work with also a network of social of small and medium enterprises. So here, in the first slide, we put the details about all the buildings that we are considering for the two projects. Particularly for Denmark, we have a massive amount of buildings, 25 buildings with 1,780 apartments. In Italy, 383 apartments within 7 buildings. In Latvia, 6 buildings, so 316 apartments. And in Slovenia is only 1 building with 26 apartments. So we have been talking, collaborating very closely with the social and affordable housing associations, our partners, and considering the type of interventions. So basically, there are interventions on the walls, on the ceilings, on the floors, on the windows. In Denmark, we are also considering, as extension of the project, the installation of solar panels and batteries as well. So the total cost of the interventions that we are considering for Denmark is about 25 million euros. For Italy is about 18 million euros, Latvia 5 million, Slovenia is much smaller, 220,000 euros. So for already part of the of this intervention, so I am talking about actual interventions that they are planned, we are planning as part of the projects, so for these interventions, for Denmark, already 72% of the interventions will be funded using the National Building Fund, but there is about 28% that is still needs to be covered. Italy, there is this ERP fund, is a national fund that should be covering 50%, but it might be lower, this percentage, because our partners, they said that it might be lower, mainly because sometimes assessing these funds, it takes time. So if they want to proceed faster, or I don't know, if they make plans actually to carry out this type of interventions and then the money doesn't come across fast enough, so then we need to raise more than 50%. Latvia, 50% comes from the Autumn Fund. But there are restrictions related to that because, for example, they need to demonstrate that the planned interventions they would lead to at least 30% of energy savings. And Slovenia, 80% comes from the Coast Guard Fund. Still, even if there is some funding, sorry, can Okay, it's fine. We need to raise some additional money, and for that, as part of the projects, we have been evaluating public-private partnership contracts that give the possibility of sharing the cost and also the risk on the investment between the social housing association and, for example, an energy saving company. So we have been considering, we've been doing this evaluation, and basically what comes out is that the share saving contract is the best performing one for most of the cases. Particularly for Italy, the initial results, they were different. We were seeing that in some cases the guarantee savings was performing a bit better, but the problem is that in the last few months, the restrictions that the social housing association are facing have increased because they were used to be able to borrow money directly, but now because the legislation has changed and so they can't borrow money directly. So the share savings actually gives the possibility of implementing this type of investment through the energy service company, who is the one actually taking the whole investment risk and is borrowing the money. So as part of the contract, I just put here the main features of the contracts. If for the social housing association, if the energy savings are higher than the minimum guarantee savings, the minimum guarantee savings is basically the cost of borrowing money in order to perform this investment, this type of refurbishment. Then they get 35% of the additional savings. But if the energy savings are lower than the minimum guarantee savings, they get zero. This makes sense is because it is the energy service company for this type of contract who is taking the risk of the investment. But still, the social housing association gets the increased value of the building after the refurbishment. Obviously, we need to consider also the benefit for the local government, for the society as an overall, that are the lower CO2 emissions. And as part of this contract, the ESCO, so in this case, we have considered the percentages, 35% and 65%, that are kind of the most used ones, but we will be also changing them on the basis of the type of risk that they can get, and also on the basis of the specific investment. So in this case, if the energy savings are higher than the minimum guarantee savings, they get the minimum guarantee savings plus 65% of the extra savings. Otherwise, they just get the energy savings if these energy savings are not higher than the actual cost of the investment. But still, the energy saving company has to face the maintenance and the operating cost. The difference between the share savings and the guarantee savings is that in the case of the guarantee savings, it's the social housing association who does the initial investment. But the risk for the investment is still taken by the energy service company. In case the energy savings are not higher than the minimum guarantee savings. So we did a ranking across countries. As you can see, the share savings are the ones performing the best in terms of return on investment that is being adjusted by risk of investment. For all the countries apart from Slovenia, where the guarantee savings is performing better. Okay, but it's just because in Slovenia they can actually borrow money, so that is the difference. Next slide, please. besides, so here we are showing what are the potential energy savings as a percentage compared to, you know, before and after the investment, and you can see that for actually Slovenia and Latvia, they are the highest. Still, they are all above 50%, considering all renovations. But for Latvia and Slovenia, they are much higher. They're higher than in other countries because the starting point is lower. So the initial energy efficiency is very, very low. But also Italy, obviously, for Denmark is better. We are showing also the impact of the various type of investment, because by talking with the social housing associations, we realized that you know, ideally would be best to do all the investments together. But yeah, we are in our evaluations, we are considering we have a model for forecasting fossil fuel prices. I didn't say that at the beginning, but where we are coming from is we have been studying energy markets for a long time, starting from fossil fuel markets, and we have models for forecasting them, considering also the volatility of stochastic volatility of the markets. So that's and they are embedded in our evaluation. So when we are doing our evaluation, we are also considering single interventions because sometimes they don't have the capacity to do all the interventions together, because it might be that it is just not doable for the people who are living there or need to move, and sometimes they just don't have all the funds all together to implement the interventions. So they asked us to do the evaluation considering all the renovations together and considering you know, each single intervention separate. Okay, I will answer all the other questions later. So for calculating the return on investment on each intervention, we consider three types of interest rates for borrowing money. Basically, it's the energy service company who is borrowing the money. But we consider the green mortgage interest rate for each country. And we consider the 20-year bank loan and also a higher interest rate for borrowing money. And in all the cases, the return on investment for all the parties is pretty good. You know, if we compare it with the risk-free interest rate, yeah, so we have considered three cases because there might be various possibilities, even though the green mortgage interest rates, the green mortgages are available in each country. It might be that there are restrictions and the accessibility is lower than what we expect. So, but even in the worst case scenario where they are assessing, they're using the interest rate for borrowing money, still the return on investment is pretty good for the ESCO. Okay, so that's and so here we have prepared graph that shows more visually how this is going to work. and for both the Social Housing Association and ESCO. So for the Social Housing Association, we are considering the increase in the value of the building in order to calculate the return on investment. So compared to the risk-free interest rates, they are always higher, but we have done also in our evaluation also an adjusted return on investment, taking care of, also the risk from, for example, inflation risk, interest rate risk, and also considering the risk of changes in fossil fuel prices, including natural gas. So that's I just wanted to add that all this evaluation is going to be used by our partners, the social housing associations, actually for making actual investments. We are currently working with some ESCO, so a representative ESCO for each country, and particularly for Italy, Denmark, and Latvia, we are going to have a crowdfunding exercise where we are going to raise at least 350,000 euros for each one of the lighthouse districts. In this crowdfunding campaign, what we are going to sell is a fraction of these PPP contracts, where the public can and also financial institutions can actually invest in this type of refurbishment. So that's we are still working on it. And just keep an eye on our website, because we will be showing the results, more detailed results of our analysis, and also the results of our crowdfunding campaign on there.
Thank you very much, Paola, for this very detailed presentation about a very important aspect, cost-benefit analysis, return of investment. And we actually have received already a number of questions on the assumptions. We take them shortly in the panel discussion. I would like to invite the other speakers to switch on their cameras, because we want to spend, well, about 25 minutes or so in a panel discussion. We're going to close the webinar at 1:45. So we have about 25 minutes left, and we have quite a number of questions coming into the chat and the Q&A. There seems to be, of course, the eternal question: how deeply do we go in a renovation? And how would that compare? How would a deep renovation compare with a lighter renovation? William, in your presentation, you showed at the very beginning that you definitely decided to go for the deeper renovation, even though it requires obviously more investment. Can you talk a little bit about maybe not so much the economic factors, because you explained the economic factors very well, but maybe also, can you explain a bit more the psychological factors behind the decision, the question, to what degree the people who made that decision were willing to anticipate a certain future, in particular, maybe also a future in which we know that there will be more regulation, which is going to bring prices for fossil fuels up, such as ETS2? Thank you.
Yeah, we took that decision in Gordium, our foreign social housing company where I worked for. In the merge of Warner and Limburg, I'm taking the same discussion as we had with Gordium a few years ago. But when we're taking all in consideration, that means that we have a waiting list of 8 to 12 years. We have not enough people to execute those renovations in a good way. So we are looking at also some social things we have to take in account. So we decided to do it first time right. That means that all the renovations we are doing in a CO2, carbon neutral and energy neutral vision. That asks a lot of money, we know, but we want to disrupt the families only once. When we do it in several times, we have to do it. We have to disrupt those neighborhoods, those houses every 3 to 4 to 5 years, and we want to do that because what I told, we need also a lot of money. And a lot of money means that when you have projects, you need also a lot of project leaders, of architects internally. So we say, let's do it in one step towards 2050. That's a lot of effort that we are demanding from our own people, but also for the tenants. In Open Lab, there's a big team of social experts who are helping those renovations well done during those project time.
So you're basically saying to have an expert team with a social expertise, which can bring people along, which know how to include people in decision making, is as important as the technical experts who decide what kind of interventions to do.
Yeah. We also have the same expertise on the social part, and they are talking in advance with those tenants. It's very important to get real decisions by those tenants, because when they are not opening the door at the morning, you won't get any results from a renovation. It takes a lot of efforts. That's for sure.
Okay, thank you. Paola Mendes, as you've just heard, William said that this is very, very important to really take people along.
Yeah.
Does the EIB have specific funding lines for that? Or if a housing company wants to get specific financial support for that, can that be built into the funding the EIB is providing?
So I think this is really what I tried to explain in the Elena facility. So, and this is also in the example that I gave, maybe it was too short to explain, but in an example that I gave in Spain, we were just trying to do this. So support this entity. In this case, it's not a social housing company, but it could be. It could be a social housing company that in order to renovate their stock, they need to go through this process, right, of defining the technicalities, but also defining, the approval and the interaction with the user, the owners, the tenants, the person that are living in those units that will be renovated. So in this case, the Elena funds can be used to these two objectives: to define the technicalities, so the level of renovation they need to achieve, they want to achieve, and on the other hand, bring in also the aspect of how are the perspective of the tenants, right? What is important for the tenant, because it's what I mentioned also, sometimes that the energy efficiency part is invisible to the tenants, because maybe for them it's more important the accessibility issue. It depends so much on the type of buildings you are working in. So whether it's maybe a house that is 10 floor, or it's just 3 or 4, like it depends. Or if it's a house from the 70s, from the 60s, it depends so much on the type of housing this promoter is looking at. But Elena this is the kind of activities that Elena could cover under its support.
Thank you very much for reconfirming that. Julien, I have a question for you, because I was very surprised to see the statistics about Denmark and Austria, how the numbers of renovations have actually gone down in the last few years compared to where they were 10 years ago. What is, in your opinion, in the conversations you have, what are the main reasons for that? given the housing shortage, the affordability crisis we have, and so on. One would expect when one looks at the market, when one looks at the need, that the opposite is happening. But are there any specific explanations for that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in general, there are two factors that explain the reduction of in some cases of the number of renovated homes is actually from the side of the cost of renovation, and on the other end from the side of the financing, cost of financing, cost of borrowing. And actually, we, as you know, we somehow were in the middle of a perfect storm in 2020, until 2022, where actually both components were really very strongly against the renovation wave in a way, because you had a strong increase of the cost of renovation, cost of material in general. And this is still the case, by the way, although it has reduced compared to the peak. We still are on average around 20% higher than in 2020 and 2019. And on the other hand, it was the cost of financing, cost of borrowing. We had in many countries almost a tripling of the interest rate. This is the case of France, for instance. And I mean, the combination of both, I mean, makes it very complicated indeed to undergo, I mean, to carry out the planned activities. And I'm not even talking about this notion of course, labor force, skills, and so on, which are still a reality. And well, the factors are multiple in terms of the workforce. And of course, we know that demographics plays a big role, but we are still in the situation of you have those strong headwinds, and that explains indeed the situation at the moment. So anything that can help impact both the construction cost of construction and the cost of capital will be very helpful. That's why we will work with the EIB indeed to find ways to decrease the cost of capital, to de-risk investment for also private investors if they are interested. And on the other hand, in terms of the cost of construction, this is all the question about scaling up solutions. I was talking about prefabricated solutions for renovation earlier in my presentation. I mean, those companies that want to invest in a factory to do that, they need to know that there will be a pipeline of projects. So in that sense, combining the different projects is a very good solution. And we try to do that by urging social housing companies to come together and do what we call central purchasing bodies or collective buying scheme using public procurement rules, so that we increase the demand for those solutions. But that's indeed challenging, and indeed what situation we are in.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. Paola Cerilli, I have a question for you coming in also from the chat in relation to your return on investment calculations, which you did. One of the questions was, have you taken the ETS2 into account when doing the calculations? And what kind of assumptions have you actually made about future energy prices in principle, in particular about gas prices, which have been very much fluctuating in the past years? They're very much dependent on geopolitical development, so it's kind of tricky to really forecast it. So if you could shed some light on the assumptions behind your calculations, that would be wonderful.
Thank you. For the modeling for natural gas prices, we come from a long, many years of experience in modeling these prices. We have models that are taking into account not only time changes, but also stochastic changes. They are based on historical data, but they're able also to move in a way that is different from the past, let's say. So these models have been tested by us already. They are part of our publications, and they are also used by the current literature. They are very often also mentioned by other papers. So this is what we are using. And for the ETS2, okay, so for the carbon prices, the energy savings that we have been calculating, so the energy savings, they are based on the carbon emissions savings that we have calculated. They are based on the specific interventions that are for each building. The carbon prices that we are using, they are from some data sets, some financial data sets that we are using for based on 10 years and 20 years of scenarios, and we are using three type of scenarios: voluntary market scenario, an hybrid scenario, and also a science-based target initiative scenario. Basically, considering various possibilities of how the market could go. So the ETS2 will add an additional, possibility to our pricing, to the carbon prices, and we haven't added this feature yet to our carbon prices, but we can do. We haven't finished our calculations yet. So the results, actually, I haven't clarified, but the results that I have presented today, they are very much in the making. We haven't even put them in our deliverables yet. So we have started, it's been a long process for us to collect the data from the social housing companies and to adjust them also on the basis of their constraints. Because, one thing is the studies that one can do theoretically as an academic, for academic paper, but in this case, they are very much applied to the specific cases. So sometimes we tell them, this contract will work the best for you. And they say, no, we cannot go ahead with that because these are our constraints. Also, the payback period, if it is too long, we need to split the investment into tranches. So there's so many variables that we need to consider, and every time we are redoing our evaluations. But we can add to our carbon prices the possibility that after the auction of the energy savings, there is a part of the revenues that they can go to people who are in need. So if would make things even better. But what I wanted to show is that even in the worst case scenario, the return on investment with even an average of the carbon prices of what the data sets and the literature tells us, still the return on investment is excellent. So it's
and that's a very important,
even better, let's say.
That's a very important statement to make, in particular, because we also will have to factor other potential future costs in. Adaptation was one of the keywords which was mentioned. Then I would like to go back to the other Paola from EIB. This is a topic which is more and more on people's minds, of course. Everybody is experiencing extreme weather events. We know the climate is changing, and people are, of course, asking themselves, and investors will ask themselves, to what degree do these new developments really mean material risks for my property, for the investments, for whatever I'm responsible to manage? Does the EIB plan or already maybe have in place specific funding tools to link adaptation and renovation measures in one go? Because ideally, as William also pointed out several times, it is actually quite beneficial to address a building only once, to do everything right from the very beginning, rather than doing actions in steps. So what's the EIB thinking and doing on integrating the topic of adaptation with energy efficiency renovation, for example?
Yes, so I think at some from the technical perspective, how I personally see it is that when you integrate, a deep renovation, when you do your calculations, you are indirectly already integrating, or you should be integrating already indirectly the issue of changes on climate patterns, right? So especially on the heat waves that I was mentioning. So an energy efficiency renovation, and especially a deep one, will imply that you are doing at least some modeling to see how your building will behave. And I think this is one of the issues we see also today, is that these kind of tools are present, but are not systematically integrated when an energy efficiency renovation is done. I think and from my perspective, it should be always use it in order to verify whether the building you are, tackling is really going to behave how you expect it to behave. And then in this process, you can also integrate, the data from different parts, our RCP, for instance, or, this data from expected future behavior into this analysis to see how your building is going to behave, and try to integrate this additional information into your portfolio of measures, whether it's going to be how the facade is going to be changing, how the roof is going to be changing. So this will give you extra information. This will give extra information to the promoters that want to undergo an energy efficiency renovation on how to include resilience into this type of buildings. And then you have other types of climatic information, right, that it could be available, and you should be integrated. So from the EIB perspective, we do look into the adaptation, I would say, from that perspective, that we encourage promoters to include this kind of information in when they are assessing their projects. And I would say that we also have this adaptation, I would say, criteria in our assessment. Sorry, but today I think mitigation is still kind of taking the most important role, because I think we're still at the beginning of the renovation, right? So we are really still trying to move from light renovations to deep renovations. I think it was mentioned also the light renovation. I think given the urgency and given the amount of stock that needs to be renovated, we really need to find a way to move away from light renovations, whenever possible, and go into deep renovations in order to to do it only once. Because it's very difficult to ensure that you will go in 3 years later to do something else, and that not only you're maybe disturbing the tenants, but you also have the risk that technically you have additional challenges. It's very different to go with one renovation or to go with step-by-steps in terms of technicalities as well. So I definitely think we need to kind of push and try to rush as much as possible to deep renovations, where this idea of future climatic conditions can be included. And in this sense, the bank is there to finance this type of project. So for us, as I said, energy efficiency is key. We are doing renovations, we are doing new buildings, we are financing new buildings also as well. But now I think there is a clear consensus that renovation really needs to be our focus. So several of our colleagues are looking for projects that do this renovation, and not only in residential buildings. I think all buildings.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Paola, you have your hand raised. Do you want to respond quickly to that point?
Yes, Paola, thank you. Yes, thank you, Oliver. Paola, just to make it clear, what we have been recommending to our partners, the Social Housing and Affordable Housing Association, is to do the interventions all together, because also in terms of economies of scale, everything is better but they told us that sometimes they just can't. So we are trying to support them to do as much as possible to, you know, all together. But in some cases it's just not possible. But the only thing is that, for example, in Latvia, they need to do as much as possible all together, because one of the constraints of the funding is that they need to demonstrate that they are achieving at least 30% of the energy savings possible. But in some other cases, depends also, for example, in Denmark, the affordable housing, all the initiatives, all the interventions that are done, they are approved by the committee of the residents. So you cannot argue with them. So that it's them deciding. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
you for clarifying that, Paola. I wanted to come back to one other point which was raised before. And that is the question of the drivers. Julien, you showed another graph where you showed basically how the tenants of social housing are going to age in the future and how much higher the share of older people will be in social housing. So that clearly is one of the drivers for renovation. But is adaptation equally big driver, which you see in the discussions which you have with your members? Is that relevant?
Yeah, I mean, totally. You mean adaptation to climate change? Yeah, I suppose of course. And indeed, for aging people, that's even more relevant, because if there is one area where actually adaptation and mitigation efforts go in the same direction, this is for the summer comfort. This is the idea of making sure that people are not in a way boiling in their dwellings, and for this you need to be careful in how you do the renovation, because not all insulation material have the same capacity to protect against the heat. I mean, this is linked to this question of thermal inertia, density. But so this is one aspect that now, when social housing companies are doing renovation, particularly if there's a lot of elderly people, there will be always a reflection about, okay, what do we do in terms of the type of renovation, type of material that we are using. Also the question about potential passive cooling strategies within the building, to make sure that it's bearable in a way during the summer. And this is something that will come increasingly in many parts of Europe, even in parts where you were not used to have this kind of conversation. For instance, in Northern Europe, I mean, we saw increasingly really hot summer in Denmark, in Sweden, and so they have this conversation about how to make sure that we do renovation that actually tick all the boxes. But obviously, I mean, it takes a bit more time to reflect about how you write your public procurement procedure. It also relates, I mean, to the fact that you need to have the good supply chain ecosystems. So yes, of course, this will be a very important topic in the future for the sector.
Okay, thank you very much. I mentioned earlier that I want to close the webinar at 1:45. We're running a little bit over time, but I see that Paola Mendes has her hand raised, and I have a final question for William as well. So we'll do these two things, and then we close maybe 10 minutes to the hour roundabout. Paola, you wanted to add something to that topic?
Yes, I just wanted to stress what Julianne was saying, because I think, this goes back again to this idea of, for me, very important of, simulating your building before launching you into a renovation, especially in high complexity, situations. And for that, I think it's very important that the social housing corporation, entity, promoter, you name it, needs the capacities to deal with this kind of tool and be able to, understand as well, the results of a simulation. What we see a lot is that, the entities, I'm not going to say social housing companies, but in general, in many cases, entities that are dealing with the renovation are doing this externally. So they are, asking someone from outside to define the project, and then they come back with a solution into the company. I think if within this entity, the capacities of understanding exactly what is the external expert saying, then you need to in the internal capacities basically need to be really reinforced in order to renovations to happen successfully. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Paula. William, from all the topics which we have discussed now, developing a simulation through a digital twin, for example, taking into account the cost effects of ETS2, you seem to have done everything right in Limburg, in Genk, in this fantastic project. Now, I'm wondering, and that is a question which also came in through the chat, if we look at the opportunity to decrease peak energy demand through deep renovation, or the alternative to invest more into the grid. Have you looked at the two alternatives in your comprehensive renovation project?
We are looking at all of the possibilities. We are talking at this moment with what Fluvius is. That's the people who are responsible for the net. They have to invest a lot in the electricity network in Flanders. And we think that as we have a performant neighborhood, we can help them to get all balanced with some battery storage. What we also are doing is working on heat nets in the neighborhood, because we can use electricity, heat to balance also our needs. And we think that after Open Lab is finished, we have a very good idea of what are the next steps who has to be done. We won't have an opportunity, or we won't have the right solution ready, but we are a long step ahead. What we are doing also is we are working on the digitalization to get all those renovation strategies to the private market. We have a responsibility as a social housing company, so we are working with drones. We are working with off-site production partners to look for opportunities to get also this material to every house in Flanders or in Europe. They can use it, so we can get all those renovations needs on the road, on the rails.
Thank you very much. So that means what you're piloting in the social housing sector can actually be applied to all privately owned residential buildings as well. That's excellent to know. Thank you very much. Well, we could, I think, continue talking and discussing for quite a while still, but we have only limited time. I would like to invite everybody to check out the excellent webpage the Open Lab project has. Also, we have a few more links in the chat. And as I said, we will definitely share this video together with all the others of the webinars, which have already been shared on the project website, on BPIE's website. And thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you very much for joining us this morning and for staying a little bit over time. I would like to thank you. We'll be in touch again with everybody through emails, through newsletters, and I wish you all the best and a good, wonderful time leading up to the Christmas holidays. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.